All right, we're going to go through an example, and I'm just going to go through a case study of how I designed a neuroscience experiment. And so we're going to go through some of the decisions I made and why I structured them the way that I did. Okay. So my research goal in my experiment was to understand the neural basis of argument. Okay, so the idea of the neural basis of argument and I guess cooperation, I'll throw that in there, cooperation. So the idea was that I could take a politically contentious issue, right, and it varied. So I could take a politically contentious issue like abortion. We looked at gun control in LA. We looked at abortion in LA and also in the Middle East, in Jordan, where, so in Southern California, a more liberal society, they tend to be for abortion. In the Middle East, it's against the law. People tend to be against abortion. We also did like attitudes to refugees. We did attitudes to provincial military forces in Iraq. So that was a heated debate. The time I did this experiment, the Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant, or Daesh as it would be referred to in Arabic, had occupied large portions of Iraq. And so these militia forces, largely made up of Iranian-backed Shia, had expelled Daesh from Iraq. And so there was this big debate. A lot of the Shia Iraqis were like, we should keep these provincial military forces because they defended us against Daesh. The Sunnis were like, well, no, they're just as bad as Daesh. They're just the Shia variant. We shouldn't have any provincial military forces. And that was a big heated issue, right? So there's a lot of these issues where people feel very, very passionate about. And we know that when you hear information that you don't agree with, instead of listening and evaluating that person's arguments, you get activity in the right lateral prefrontal cortex that shuts down your ability to integrate any of those new messages, and you're just counter-arguing, you shut it out. So I want to look at the neural basis of argument and see when we activate this activity and when we don't. We also know that there's, if you have two people that are in this debate or working together, if they have similarity in their neural patterns, they're more likely to compromise and to get along. And if they're disparate, then they're not as much. So we conducted an experiment where we could prime them to be argumentative or prime them to be conciliatory. And we would give them a resource allocation task up front, which would be like how you would prioritize funding for these like 10 issues. And then they had to work on that together. So you now can measure the level of compromise from the initial condition to this after they've gone through the priming, and now they have to work together with somebody of the opposing viewpoint as them. And we had recruited people that were highly polarized. Right? So, so you have this variable that they have been primed for, right? So you have a position of for or against a given topic. You have the argument condition. Are you argumentative or conciliatory? Well, you get the idea. And then we expose them to like two different news stories, one and then the other, so you could kind of see, it was from two different points of view, but the language was either, if we're taking gun control, it's like you could either take the point of, hey, gun control is a very complex issue and there's a lot of concerns on both sides of the issue and we need to respect people equally. I believe that, First Amendment, people should have a right to carry a gun, right? That would be conciliatory. Argumentative would be like, I can't believe people want to take our guns away. What's wrong with people, right? Like, I don't care if people are getting shot, or whatever the case would be, right? I'm trying to be a little extreme, right? And that's what we did in the experiment, is we tried to take these very extreme cases where people were almost ignorant or very extremist sounding and emotional in their arguments versus conciliatory where they were kind of doing it. But we showed them messages from people of both persuasions, right? So they heard both views, and so then you had the order of the news story. News story. Okay, and so what we ended up doing then is these become 3 variables that each have 2 levels. So we have a 2 to the 3rd or 8 different combinations of the experiment. And what I did is I did 4 replications of the study, right? So we did this times 4, randomized differently, and I was able to extend the day, right, so that we were able to get 8 subjects per day over 4 days for 32 different experiments. And the reason why we did that is because I didn't want to deal with blocking, right? So I have a complete replication of all combinations every day. I can randomize the order each day, and now I have properly blocked. I have tested all of the combinations at the proper levels, and then we can estimate that. We had more time. I got an extra couple days. I got additional funding to conduct more experiments, and so then what I ended up doing is, because I had 2 extra days that I already had the facility, so my marginal cost of running additional subjects was lower. We had originally had the days as backups in case something went wrong, but we were able to fully execute all of these, so we ran the extra 2 days. We ran 8 subjects a day, so I got an extra 16 experiments, and that gave me 48. And so the idea is you always want to get more if you can get more, but you want to try and keep consistent to your design to make sure you're not creating leverage and you're having like certain points that have like more analysis. Now the analysis of this data is somewhat time consuming, so ideally if I had been able to in the evenings do data analysis on this to see is one of these factors not relevant, then that might have affected the design for what I could do going forward. So I'm going to give you another experiment. So in this experiment, while I was doing this study, I go to a coffee shop and I see this famous Iraqi celebrity, and I'm like, dude, you're like al-Bashir. And he's like, you're an American, you don't know who I am. And I'm like, no, you're like funny. And he's like, yeah, I don't believe you still. And I'm like, you're like al-Bashir, you're like Jon Stewart of Iraq. And he's like, oh, you do know who I am. What are you doing? And I'm like, I'm a neuroscientist, I'm doing this experiment. And he goes, oh my gosh, can I do like a video or something for your experiment? And I'm like, of course you can, yeah. So like, what would you do? So he comes to me the next day, his video's a little long. I'm like, dude, it's a little long. So he's like, I'll come back tomorrow. He comes back with a shorter video. So I'm like, man, I need to do more experiments. So I just basically paid for extra time in the facility, and we did the extra study, and I had to throw something together. So I knew where the U.S. military kept a couple counter-radicalization videos. The comedian gave me one. I found another one on the country of Bahrain. So I had essentially 4 counter-sectarian videos. And what is a sectarian video? Sectarian is like religiously extreme. So it's like, how do you help Sunnis and Shias get along? It's like Catholics and Protestants. How do you get them to get along, right? Or the opposite of being, sectarian is where you're really into your religion and you don't like people of the other religion. So what we were able to do is we were able to show Sunnis and Shia videos, all 4 videos, which maybe wasn't the best design choice for me in retrospect, but I decided to show them all 4 videos, and I was just going to randomize the order of the video, and then I could see did they have any impact in neural response, right? Counter-arguing or engagement or integration based on this. And so I could put the Sunnis and the Shias in 2 different rooms. They weren't together. And then we had a baseline survey on things like, so I created a sectarianism scale to measure the level of sectarianism, which was highly effective. You could do that by the way you do that is you ask questions multiple different ways, and then you see if they kind of tend to be correlated. It's called Cronbach's alpha. Then you would say that they're internally consistent, and that's a consistent scale. If they're wildly different and they're not very correlated, then you haven't properly measured that construct very well. So I had a baseline, and then I had a 2-week follow-up. And we chose 2 weeks because, one, it was feasible. Two, it's been replicated in some other studies that when you're, when you're impacted with misinformation or correction of misinformation, you have this 2-week influence period, and then those effects tend to decay after 2 weeks. So that's why we used 2 weeks. And I had resources to do about 24 to 30 experiments, about 6 per day. Right? So I had between 4 to 5 days to do this. So I could either do 4 days and have a backup day, or I could try and just run through 5 days. And so what would I do for the order of this experiment? Well, in order to randomize the different conditions of the videos, right, I ended up having an order permutation of 4 factorial. What is 4 factorial? Well, that is 4 times 3 times 2, which is 12 times 2 equals 24. So there's 24 different combinations of videos that I could execute in this experiment. So what I did is I only have resources for 24 to 30, so I basically created the run order of the 24 different experiments, and then I varied, so what is that? That would be like video A, B, C, D, A, B, D, C, A, C, B, D, A, D, B, C, and so on. So you run through every single combination, and then I split them so that half of them were assigned to the Sunni condition, half of them were assigned to the Shia condition. So I ended up having 24 experiments. And because of that different order, and because of the different Sunnis and Shias split, I decided to not do an extra 6, to only do the 24 and keep that last day as a backup day. And so it turned out that we ended up running them all 24. It appeared that they were all good data at the time, so we ran none on the backup day. We just took the day off, and I forget what I did. I think I went to the Dead Sea or something. And then when we did analysis later, we found that 2 of these data points were bad data points, and we didn't have full data on all regions. But again, it takes a little while to pre-process and run through that, so we just didn't know. It would have been nice to have the time to do that. We didn't. And so that was the design decision that we had there. All right, one other experiment that we'll talk about, experiment number 3, is we are going to assess engagement with a video. So I'm going to do a video ad. Maybe it's a tobacco cessation ad, and I have some adolescents that are going to be viewing this ad. So the subjects are going to view a blank screen for 30 seconds, right? Blank screen for 30 seconds. And then they're going to watch a 1-minute video. And then after that, then they'll go back to the blank, and then maybe they'll see another video, right? And they'll do that. And so assume that we have 20 subject resources. That means that you have facilities, equipment, recruiting dollars to incentivize like 20 people to come to your experiment. And so the question is, how would you design the experiment? And so that's question 1. And 2, what is the statistical approach for analysis? Okay, so I would like you to pause the video, and then when you're ready and you've thought about that a little bit, then you can hit resume and you can hear my answer. All right, I'm assuming you've paused the video, you've answered this question. So again, the experiment is we have people that are going to view a blank screen for 30 seconds. They're going to then watch a 1-minute video, like an anti-smoking video of some sort. And you have 20 subjects to go through this experiment. You're measuring neural imaging, neural data as they're going through that. how would you design the experiment, and what would be your statistical approach. So what I would do is, the first thing is I would do a block average. So a block average of the baseline, and then I would take the block average of the video, and I'm considering that the value at the high, the value at the low. So I've got two levels here of video stimulus, baseline, and I have that for each brain region that I want to look at. So I might have one for my right lateral prefrontal cortex, so I got one for my left-right asymmetric frontal pole activity to measure engagement. And so with that, I have two levels. So one factor, two levels, right? Then that is going to be a two-sample t-test. Right? That's how I'm going to approach it. Now, how am I going to run subjects? Well, is there really any difference in those subjects? I haven't given you any difference. You might either make a decision to say, I'm either going to have 50% male and 50% girls, or male and female, and then I'm going to randomize those so that there's no ordering effect. Or you may decide to just stick strictly with males or strictly with females. I had this as an issue where I had very few experimental resources I could do in my first experiment in Jordan, and we were dealing with response to anti-smoking ads, response to family planning ads, and response to counter-radicalization ads. Now, in doing these studies, right, we find that men tend to be more likely to smoke, and men tend to be more likely to be recruited by extremist organizations, but women tend to be more likely to do the family planning. Well, if I added this variable of male and female, and I think my total experimental resources were somewhere on order of about 20 that I could run through, and I didn't know how this experiment was going to run, I didn't know if I could get to 20, I didn't know how that was going to go, I felt that if I ran both genders, that would be problematic. So I had to choose. And even though women would have been much better for the family planning ads, what I decided to do was I decided to reduce my family planning ads, because I had too many ads, and keep the smoking ads, the counter-radicalization ads, and only 3 of the family planning ads, and then expose them to only men. And the males didn't have very good response to the family planning ads, because I just don't think it resonated with them. They didn't care. But and the resonance with the counter-smoking ads was kind of weak. The ads weren't that good. The terrorism ads showed higher engagement, and that was those results were published in the Making Neuroscience Less Weird paper. So if you look me up on Google Scholar, or look for the reading material in the course, and you've read through that paper, that's where that study came from. But the reason why I chose males was because of marketing. So I was getting Department of Defense funding to support the experimentation, and I figured, well, what's the Department of Defense going to care about? Are they going to care about how women respond to family planning ads? Or are they going to care about how males respond to counterterrorism ads? And so I figured that was the better angle, and that's why we made the decision. So sometimes these decisions are made for just purely resourcing, marketing decisions, not even so much what's best for the science. But those are all trade-offs that you need to think about when you're designing an experiment and you're moving forward. And so what I hope this block has done is it's introduced you to some of the considerations from a statistical perspective of doing experimentation, and it's helped you get to this idea that you can be clever in the way you select the experiments you're going to do, so that you can be more cost effective and more careful of resources, so that you're basically prioritizing experiments that are going to give you better insight or give you a better angle for funding. So thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed this material, and I'll see you next time.